Have you ever wondered how a peaceful movement can transform into one of the world's most notorious extremist groups? Today, we're delving into the complex and often misunderstood story of Boko Haram, a name that has dominated headlines for years. This isn't just a story about conflict, it's a story about a nation, its people, and the deep-seated issues that can fuel extremism. So, buckle up, because we're going back to where it all began. In the early 2000s, in the city of Maiduguri in northeastern Nigeria, a cleric named Mohammed Yusuf founded a movement. Its official name was long and complex, Jamaat Ahlis Sunnah Lidawati wal Jihad. But the world would come to know it by its Hausa nickname Boko Haram. Roughly translated, this means Western education is forbidden. This name wasn't just a slogan, it was the core of their ideology. Yusuf and his followers believed that Western influences, from education and democracy to the very structure of the Nigerian state, were the root of the corruption and moral decay they saw around them. Initially, Boko Haram was not a violent group. It started as a religious and social movement. Yusuf preached a return to a purer form of Islam and advocated for the implementation of Sharia law across Nigeria. His message resonated deeply, especially with the youth in the impoverished and neglected northeastern region. For many young people who felt abandoned by a corrupt government and saw little hope for their future, Yusuf's vision offered a sense of purpose, community, and an alternative to a system they believed had failed them. They built mosques and schools, providing services the state couldn't or wouldn't. For a time, it was a growing but largely peaceful community. So, what went so horribly wrong? The turning point came in 2009. Tensions had been simmering for a while between Boko Haram members and Nigerian security forces. A minor dispute over motorcycle helmets escalated into a full-blown confrontation. The Nigerian government launched a massive crackdown, and in the ensuing violence, hundreds of Boko Haram members were killed. Critically, their leader, Mohammed Yusuf, was captured and later died in police custody. His death, which his followers saw as an extrajudicial killing, was the spark that lit the powder keg. It transformed a movement into an insurgency. With Yusuf gone, a new, more ruthless leadership took over, led by Abu Bakr. The group's mission shifted from peaceful preaching to a violent campaign of revenge against the Nigerian state. They were no longer just advocating for change. They were now waging a war. Their targets were symbols of the government and the Western influence they despised. Police stations, military barracks, government buildings, and, tragically, churches and schools. The ideology remained, but the methods became brutally violent. This was the birth of the Boko Haram we know from the Nusra group, committed to creating an Islamic State through force. The years following 2009 saw a terrifying escalation. Boko Haram's tactics grew more and more brutal. They began using suicide bombings, ambushes, and large-scale raids on towns and villages. They instilled fear and demonstrated a shocking disregard for human life. The world truly began to pay attention in April 2014. In a move that sparked global outrage, Boko Haram fighters stormed a girls' secondary school in the town of Chibok and kidnapped 276 schoolgirls. The news sent shockwaves across the globe. Suddenly, this conflict in a corner of West Africa was on everyone's screen. The hashtag #BringBackOurGirls went viral, with everyone from politicians to celebrities demanding action. The Chibok kidnapping was a horrifying turning point, but it was just one act in a much larger tragedy. The violence created a massive humanitarian crisis. Millions of people were forced to flee their homes, becoming displaced within their own country. Entire communities were destroyed. Thousands upon thousands of lives were lost. The Nigerian government, struggling to contain the insurgency, launched major military operations. But Boko Haram proved to be a resilient and adaptable foe. They used guerrilla tactics, melting into the vast, remote landscapes of the Sambisa Forest and the Lake Chad Basin, making them incredibly difficult to defeat. For a long time, they even controlled significant territory, running their own brutal form of administration. As the crisis deepened, the international community could no longer stand by. The #BringBackOurGirls campaign put immense pressure on world leaders to act. Countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, and France began providing support to Nigeria, offering military training, intelligence, and equipment. But perhaps the most significant military response came from Nigeria's own neighbors. Realizing the threat was regional, Chad, Cameroon, and Niger joined forces with Nigeria in 2015 to create a multinational joint task force. This coordinated military push did manage to reclaim a lot of the territory Boko Haram had captured. They drove the militants out of major towns and back into their rural hideouts. But just when it seemed like Boko Haram might be defeated, the conflict took another complex turn. The group began to fracture. Internal disagreements over leadership and tactics caused a major split. One of the most significant developments was when a major faction, led by Mohammed Yusuf's son, pledged allegiance to the so-called Islamic State, or ISIS. They rebranded themselves as the Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP. This wasn't just a name change. ISWAP adopted different and in some ways more sophisticated tactics than the original Boko Haram. This fragmentation made the conflict even harder to resolve. Instead of one enemy, security forces now faced multiple competing extremist groups, each with its own agenda. So, where does that leave us today? The situation is incredibly complex. On one hand, the brute force and territorial control of the original Boko Haram, led by Abubakar Shekau until his death in 2021, has significantly weakened. Intense military pressure has taken its toll. However, its splinter group, ISWAP, remains a potent and dangerous force in the Lake Chad region. They have proven to be more strategic, often targeting military installations rather than civilians, in an attempt to win the hearts and minds of the local population. The violence continues, though its nature has changed. The biggest legacy of this conflict is the devastating humanitarian crisis. Millions of people still rely on aid to survive. Generations of children have grown up knowing nothing but conflict, with their education and futures stolen. The region is stuck in a cycle of violence, poverty, and displacement. While military operations are ongoing, there's a growing recognition that bullets alone cannot solve this problem. The real solution lies in addressing the root causes that allowed Boko Haram to emerge in the first place. Extreme poverty, widespread government corruption, lack of access to education and jobs, and a deep sense of political neglect and injustice. In conclusion, the story of Boko Haram is a tragic lesson in how social and political grievances, when left to fester, can explode into unimaginable violence. It started with a preacher who tapped into the real frustrations of his people. It was transformed by a violent state response, and then spiraled into a brutal insurgency that has devastated a region and destabilized a nation. Bringing lasting peace to northeastern Nigeria will require more than just a military victory. It will require a comprehensive approach that rebuilds trust, provides opportunities, delivers justice, and gives the people of the region a genuine stake in a peaceful and prosperous future. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. It's a heavy topic, but understanding these complex issues is crucial. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. See you next time.